Hi, I'm Leo, the cat with questions. I've been thinking about the gift of tongues. It seems kind of controversial in churches today, so it seems like it's something we ought to dig into a little bit. I made a list of positive things that Paul has to say about speaking in tongues from 1 Corinthians 13 and 14. Pause now and take a look. There are quite a few negative sounding things in 1 Corinthians 14 about the use of tongues in meetings. So many, in fact, that they seem redundant. This doesn't seem typical of Paul. Paul's a very good writer and tends to get to the point for the most part. So I have to think that some of this stuff has been added. It wasn't things he originally wrote. Anyway, it could all be summed up in saying that there's a question posed in 1 Corinthians 14:6. But now, brethren, if I come to you speaking with tongues, what shall I profit you, unless I speak to you either by way of revelation, or of knowledge, or of prophesying, or of teaching? Well, seems to me Paul answered his own question in 1 Corinthians 14:2, where he says, "For he who speaks in a tongue does not speak to men, but to God." The point here is that speaking in tongues can be a powerful prayer. God's response can be beneficial to everyone. Yes, agreed that speaking only or primarily in tongues in meetings is not advisable. There is definitely a place for tongues. Paul's positive statements make clear that speaking in tongues in meetings is beneficial and should be permitted. In verses 27 and 28, something smells off to me here, and that's because by saying, if there is no interpreter, let him keep silent in the church and let him speak to himself and God, this actually contradicts verse 39, do not forbid to speak with tongues. So, of course, being the cat with questions, I asked the Holy Spirit about this, and what I'm getting is that verse 28 should be actually removed, and verse 27 should be softened rather than saying let one interpret, it should be saying allow one, make space for someone to interpret. I've heard a very good question about speaking in tongues, and that question is, how can I agree with a prayer in tongues that I do not understand? The answer that I think the Holy Spirit is giving us is, use the gift of discernment. How does the tongue feel to you? Do you feel that this is coming from the Holy Spirit? Do you have a sense of an answer to prayer? By way of summary, Paul says twice, let all things be done. And that includes the gift of tongues. Here are my questions. 1 Corinthians 14 makes it clear that speaking in tongues is desirable, a beneficial gift. Do you agree? Have you asked for this gift? What about the gift of prophecy? It seems to me that 1 Corinthians 14 has been modified with the goal of preventing use of tongues in meetings. Do you agree? What can be lost if tongues are not permitted in meetings?